The talk I'm going to give is called Information is Beauty in Musical Software Design. It's going to go beyond this, what the title of this talk is, but I actually designed this talk, and I know this is like a group of people that think about this all the time, but I designed this talk for a group of people who don't think about this at all. So I designed it for like a Humanities Day talk at University of Chicago, where I was talking to like people who had never thought about computers in their life and making music. So, but that's not where I'll stay, but it's a place where I'm going to start because I think a really simple and dumb example is a good place to start. Here's two quotes. Ultimately, music is at its core a means of communication. Computers offer ways of enhancing interconnection, so it's exciting and fun. It's Scott Gresham Lancaster from the Hub. And Don Buchla, uncertainty is the basis for a lot of my work. One always operates somewhere between total predictable and the totally unpredictable. That's key, and that's kind of what the whole talk is about. So how to think about uncertainty and how to think of uncertainty as information. And information is what we put into the system, and information is what we perceive. And the more information we have, the noisier things are, and the less information we have, the simpler they are. All right, yeah, that's probably what I just said. So the simpler an object is, the less information it conveys. The more complexity, the more information. So in creating software for live manipulation of instruments, we want to create a situation where the electronics performer, meaning us, has the ability to add lots of information to the signal chain. Very little information, so sometimes you want to add no information, and sometimes you want to be in between. So this is another quote from James Gleick, this wonderful book. It's a total pop science book, but it's really awesome. It's The Information, about information technology, or information science, information theory. Let's edit that out. Information theory, thank you. Everything we care about lies somewhere in the middle where pattern and randomness intersect. So that's everything in our lives that we care about. Like if something's too simple, it's not interesting. If something's too complex, it's not interesting. But somewhere in the middle, where something is uncertain, really is where we want to be. Yeah, and predictability seems to be a good measure of the information in music. So we like things that are predictable, but not too much. And even, all of us land somewhere else in a different place on the spectrum of that. And some of us even want something so unpredictable so that we are shocked by our own unpredictability. So that's like maybe the extreme, and then the other extreme might be somebody who wants something to repeat a lot and get us into a zone. So when we're designing software, one layer of information that we have is the effects. So oftentimes people are like, oh, how is music just like, they'll look at my software and say, oh, how is music just effects? It's like, well, I'm dealing with live manipulation of instruments, and a layer of information comes from the effects, and a layer of information comes from some other stuff that we'll talk about in a minute. But I'm going to talk about some effects with a really nice Bach example. So let's listen to this. We're going to hear it 4 times. like I said, I'm going to start in the place of like a really simple example, and not that Bach is ever simple, but this piece of the Sarabande, this beginning of this first minute of this piece, is already full of different streams of information. So there's like a phrasing stream where the instrumentalist is dealing with certain kinds of phrasing. There's like a stream of homophony and polyphony, or single notes and double stops, where like all of a sudden the double stop like opens up the information stream. There's a phrasing written into the music where like notes are moving kind of fast sometimes, and then all of a sudden it'll hit a note and it's like, ooh, it just holds out for a long time. So the rate of change of notes gets faster and slower over time, and then the rate of change of harmony actually changes drastically over the course of this 1 minute of music. So the harmony won't change, then all of a sudden the notes go boom, 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 and the harmony changes really fast. So Bach, king of this idea already. So let's just add a delay to it, right? So that is an example of like not adding much information, actually. Like a delay is not adding much information, because if information is predictability, this is super predictable, right? Once you hear the one thing coming out of the one speaker, you hear it, you know it's going to come out of the next speaker. It almost adds no levels of unpredictability, so not that much information. So that's something to think about when we're designing software, is like, well, just doing a delay is probably not interesting. There is some information added, which I think, did anyone have any ideas on what that might be?
The intersection of the delay and the line, the harmony that it creates.
Yeah,
Predictable.
exactly. So there's some unpredictability about that, right? Because there's definitely some sounds you're like, oh, listen to that harmony. I didn't think that was going to happen. So this is not a canon, right? In a sense of like a compositional sense, which a written out canon is all about these intersections of harmony that are going to happen between the lines. This is not like that. It's actually just a simple delay, but there are some moments where there's information added. So I'm going to add the Sarabande with kind of a complex delay. So so the Sarabande's playing, and then there's like multiple delays that are happening at different times, and then each of those delays is filtered with a different filter. I like this example for many reasons. One of them is I made this effect in 2003, and I'm still using it. So call me an old man. Now this I find quite different than the simple delay. Actually, I think there's a lot of information at it because there's a lot of unpredictability because you never know how far away the delay is going to happen. You don't know really what it's going to sound because you don't know where the filter is going to be, right? So there's these two elements of like this filter, sliding filters. You don't know whether it's going up or down. You don't know how far back it is, and it kind of keeps it working for me the whole time, unlike the simple delay. So here's the information. There's more information, and that more information is due to the unpredictability of the system. Slightly unpredictable, not highly unpredictable. Should I play them all at once, or should we skip down? Here, let's listen to 2 seconds of it, because I think this. The thing I like about this is it's not the Bach anymore, it's something else. It's like a Tarkovsky soundtrack. You can see this working in like Solaris or something, as you're like peering down on the planet. And there's a lot of information, because there's actually so much going on in that. There's a lot of information that's taken away because you lose the phrasing, the subtle phrasing. You lose the harmonic motion. You lose the like change, the change of rate of change of notes. But then you get this like wall of information that you kind of have to like dig your ears into and really focus on. So it's this information, this kind of complexity that I'm going for in software design that's beyond just the effect. So that was using an effect to add complexity, and now we'll talk about modular design as a vehicle for this musicality and complexity. I don't have any. You can stop me at any time with a question. I'm glad to. So, yeah. So oftentimes, this is David Wessel. Oftentimes, especially as a freer improvisation of context, there is no timeline. Unfortunately, most of the DAWs, including Ableton as live as it pretends to be, have a timeline and orient you in that manner. So meaning like things in most pieces of software that we use need to be set up in a linear way. And we need to know when things happen one after the other. And what he's saying is, well, he's not saying this, but maybe what he's saying is that we want to be able to not do that. So how can we set up a system so that we can go make things happen in any order? I'll say that when I met Alex and PA, I was working on a piece called American Tokyo Daydream 2, which I thought was funny because, what's that?
Which is good.
Oh, thanks. Well, it's funny because it was before American Tokyo Daydream 1. That was like the joke of the piece. And the idea behind this piece was, okay, I'm going to have a piece where I write a piece of software, and then every time I play it with a new person, I'll like change the software a little bit to like, so it's like I'm playing with guitar, cool, I'll have some effects that are guitar-like and see what works when I go to play with the violin. Okay, I'll keep what works with the violin, but then I'll replace stuff that doesn't work with new stuff that's for the guitar. But things happened linearly, so it happened, there's like a structure of the piece. It's like this, then this, then this, then this. So it's like, okay, the beginning, we're actually using that filter delays thing, then the next thing I'm using this thing where I record and play back with pitch shifting, and then the next thing I'm doing distortion. You know, so it was a very linear piece. And I had instructions to the performer like, oh, okay, look, you've got to play like this in this section, play like this in this section, and then we'll improvise that way. What I discovered was the more I did this piece, and it took like a year, maybe 2 years of doing this piece on and off with different players, was that, oh, if I could get the system so that instead of going this thing, then this thing has to happen, then this thing has to happen, then this thing has to happen, then I would have a system where things could happen in any order. And in doing them in any order, I discovered improvisation. Because a Derek Bailey quote is, you know, like an improviser knows what, I think it's a real paraphrase, but every improviser, like you know what you're going to do, you just don't know when you're going to do it. Right, you have to have all the tools. You're not just making it up as you go along. You knew you were going to do that. You just didn't know when. So here's a nice Anthony Braxton quote, and he's talking about his his compositions, but I think it applies really well to musical software. So given structures will make certain things happen. That's what a structure is. It doesn't have anything to do with me telling somebody what to feel, but with creating a structural situation or a language situation that has particular variables which will allow certain things to happen. And each individual will be able to establish their own relationship with it. So essentially, this relates to software in that if you set up a software system where certain things can happen, and hopefully lots of different things can happen, and you're playing with an instrumentalist, then you can play off each other and find new roles so they can hear what's happening in the music and discover a place in the electronics that with their instrument. And this dialogue goes back and forth, kind of the electronics creates a structure, the fact that somebody's playing guitar creates a structure, and then we can create a structure together. I had a really nice little epiphany today on the train, sunny day, going through out of London, and looking at the beautiful English countryside, and that Pierre and I the other day were talking about form and how important form is, and were we talking about form? We were, yeah. And essentially what happens in at least my free improvisations, and I think the free improvisations of what groups of good improvisers, is that the form comes out of the structure of what you've set up. And I feel like what I've set up here is a structure that is the form, and then the music is the result of that. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, so you guys know this, digital audio workspaces are highly linear in structure, right? So it's like left to right, top to bottom, right? So the time is gonna go that way, and then the effects go this way, right? We all know that. So it's that flatland. Escaping flatland is the essential task of, so this is from Envisioning Information. Has anyone read this book? Amazing. Yeah, you read it? Yeah, it's incredible. So this guy, Edward Tufte, he's talking about information design basically in 2 dimensions. So taking like big, like he'll look at like train schedules, right? Or like the London Underground tube map, right? It's taking this like 3-dimensional thing and then flattening it out so that you can see all the information in two dimensions. So escaping flatland, which is that flat space, is the essential task of envisioning information for all the interesting worlds, physical, biological, imaginary, human, that we seek to understand are inevitably and happily multivariate in nature, not flatlands, right? So even though like we escape flatland in a DAW by various means, by like pre-composing structures, having things, you know, automating information, and we can think over here and do that, and then we can think over here and do that, and then we can put them together. We can think out of time when we're composing in a DAW, but when we're improvising, we can't necessarily do that. So I think that's what he's getting at. Now, this instrument, we all know, the violin, incredible multidimensional interface. So the violin, if you think about what it is, you know, you hold it, and left hand changes the length of the string. Right hand, the bow, you know, you get closer to here, you get more partials, you get farther away, you have this filter along here. The pressure with which you bow totally changes the timbre of the instrument. The speed at which you bow, and so there's all this like multivariate information that we can put into this system. And there's another thing about it that's amazing. So there's all these different variables that we can change over time, but also we can change those variables without going very far, right? Like the farthest, like you can go from sul pont high on the E string to like you know, sul tasto low on the G string. There is no C string. Low on the G string in like no time, right? You can just do that. So it's an incredible interface for speed and agility, and then also just a wide range of timbres. I mean, even going to pits, like you can go to pits just by moving your hand right to there. Yeah. So, so this wonderful instrument, the bukla, it's actually similar in a way. I mean, it's gigantic and like confusing. But I think the violin's confusing too. I mean, it takes a really long time to learn how to play a violin, right? So, so this gigantic piece of information, there's some beautiful things about it, which is the tasks, like the violin, like the left hand, the right hand, the bow position, are actually modularized. They're like really clear, separate things. So you've got this like, what is this? An oscillator, another oscillator. This is the best. Anyone ever play one of these? It's a module 276, I think, the spectral filter. I was listening to Mr. Roboto today by the Styx. At the end, it is the last sound of the piece is definitely that. There's no doubt in my mind that it is the spectral gate, because what this does is you put the sound into it, and then you trigger with the trigger, and this is like a equalizer, and it overrides the settings of the equalizer, and it randomly switches all of the bands of the equalizer, so you get this like. Listen to Mr. Roboto. It's good. Actually, let's check it out. I'll prove my point.
Switch function.
Yeah, that's a good idea, Mr. Roboto. All right, hopefully it's not too loud. Okay, great. There it is. Maybe it's not. There it is. With a random pitch and a random filter with the same trigger. You buy it? No, you don't buy it. Alex doesn't buy it. I can tell. All right, whatever.
You can do it somehow.
Yeah. No, it's anyway. So awesome. This is like the influence on me on how to think about designing a software instrument, because it takes each element of what you want to do, and it gives its own module, and then each of those modules is actually really controllable. Like there's these knobs, these physical things that you can control, and the modules. Nice thing about modular design is like individual modules don't need to know anything about any other module, right? It's just this independent world that you can kind of plug into. So I don't know why I put that picture there in the. Yeah. So we want to set a system where many sounds are possible. I think that's why, right? Hopefully many sounds are possible. And where each of these sounds is quickly available to the performer. It's not true on the buchla unless you've patched it right. It's not getting in the patch is the hard part. Okay, so I'm going to play some music. And then I'll get back to talking about the software, just so you see what I mean about the speed and the lots of sounds. And yeah, it's about 7 minutes. This is me and Peter, who, if you saw in Aaron's piece the other day. So, yeah, so it's nice to be able to play with somebody who can do that. So, but also be able to react to somebody who can do that, which is challenging. So, yeah, so like I said at the beginning, like step one is making a set of sonically interesting modules. So, in my setup, I have tons of different modules, and actually, let me I'm gonna jump out of here for a second and so I'm going to open this up, software. Hopefully it's happy. Okay, so these are the modules that are available, right? So, and they're things I've made over like, 10 years. So, so the one we heard earlier is the feedback delays. I was talking to Frederic the other day, we realized that I couldn't remember the name of the modules because sometimes I don't like look at the names that often. So I was like, "There's that module." And I couldn't find it. Crackle synth. So there's all these different, bit crusher, bandpass filter, analog synth, equalizers, envelopes. So there's all these different swoop down. That's a nicely named one. So having lots of different things to do is really important in the setup. You can't just have one thing to do. But what's nice about this is like it's not like I made them all at once, right? I made them slowly over time, and I've been able to build up a system slowly over time. So, yeah.
How many of those would you have open at any one given?
Yeah, I'll show you that in a minute.
Okay.
A lot. Yeah, so probably, well, we'll see when, I don't actually know. So, yeah, so having lots, and to be honest, like, there's not that many things you can do, right? If you think about the computer as an instrument, it's like, if you want to really boil it down, you can delay things, right? Am I being oversimplifying there? Like it's
You can change their amplitude as well.
Yes, exactly.
you can delay things and you can modulate them. Because modulate, that would be another. So that's it, right? And like everything we do comes out of that. So like really, there's not that many things we can do, but it's like it's like Mexican food, you know? It's like a burrito and a taco. It's like the same thing, but they're different. So same ingredients. Yeah, and then step 2 is to make a home for the object. So what I've done is I've created a 5x5 array, and yeah, so you can see it here. This 5x5 array of stuff. Now I've got 2 of them open, so that's a little confusing. I will undo that.
Just kill it.
Kill it. There we go. So basically, there's a 5x5 array of where things can go. So it's the home for the objects. And if I want to create an object, I just drag and drop. So if I want to create the resin draw object, lunk, right? And there it is. The system is set up so that I can have 25 on a page basically, and I can easily create them and easily patch them together sonically. One thing I don't do is I don't patch together controls. Right, so that's something I would like to work on. I don't have anything that patches a control to another control. I'm starting to get into that with this design I'm working on with analog synthy stuff. But yeah, ooh. So if I wanted to, I could also I could patch this to the output actually. So the screen normally isn't that small. So doink. And then we should be able to make some sound, hopefully. Yeah, good. So you can see I could patch this out. All the internal buses are 8 channels. So you can see that this is at 60 and this is at 68, and that's because there's an 8-channel bus going between the objects. Now there's pretty, and you have the same thing. We actually discovered we have the almost exact same setup, like individually, where it's like, yeah, this might be 8 channels, but then if it's going to something that needs 1 channel, it just mixes them down to 1 channel, which maybe there's a more elegant way to do that. But thinking about like busing in that way is I'm not sure the answer for that. But I can plug resin draw into filter delays, and yeah, that's awkward. Right there. Okay, and do that. And whoops, that was totally the wrong one. So check that out. Whoa, it's gone now. There we go, and there. So now I've patched them together, and they should make sound as friends. Yeah, I could listen to that one for a while. And I think it's because we have these 2 things that are actually quite simple, but plugging them together all of a sudden creates complexity, right? Because I mean, I knew what that was going to do, but it actually sounds better than I thought it would. so that's, I think, one of the exciting things about thinking modularly is that you can take simple ideas and plug them together, and that's where the complexity comes from. There's often times where I'll find these spots that I've just never found before because of that, just plugging things together. Now, a question inevitably comes up like, oh, the patch you used to play, how often do you change that? And like, in the last 2 years, I've probably changed one thing because I just haven't had the time to code and make new things, but I've had the time to play and be musical and learn how to be musical within the system. So, yeah. So step 2, create a home for the objects. Yes, please.
Just before you go on, the
Yep.
grid,
Mm-hmm.
is the routing separate from the grid layout? Is the grid layout just spaces, or is it actually passing, along the chain?
It's not passing. It's right. It's not passing along the chain. It's
Because you seem to patch the.
I patched the output to the input.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
they're just literally slot spaces.
Yeah, and I can put as many, and it'll figure out
Sorry, you don't tell us what the S's are.
signal in, so sound in.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a microphone.
So you can just sort of patch several things into an input and mixes them together.
Yeah, exactly. And so for each individual input, it'll look at what the input is and it'll look at what I need. And so if it's a mono in and it needs mono, cool. If it's a mono in and it needs 8 channels, it'll spread it out to 8 channels. If it's stereo and it needs 8 channels, it'll only send 2 of the channels over the 8.
Okay.
Just because I didn't, or maybe not. I'm not sure how I did it. It's like almost never. There's things that you think about when you're making the software like this, like you're like, oh, what if I need to do this? And then you never ever do that ever in your life. So, which is fine. It's good to think about things that you're never going to do. So yeah, so cool. Any other questions?
Latency?
For what?
Yeah, all of this. No, first one, when you pile up a network, can you feedback? Can you send effects into themselves?
No, but yes. So no, I can't, but that's just because I'm using the wrong input. So actually, I'm making a new set of things that are like analog synths. So like, it's like its own module that then has a system of modules. So I'm trying to make noise maths. That was a good place to start, let me tell you.
Very simple.
Very simple. No, actually, that's like the most. And that's my point actually with doing this, because it's actually kind of dumb. But it's that I think we often think like, oh, an oscillator is a sine wave in SuperCollider or Max, and then I'm going to put that into or I'm going to put a saw wave into a filter. That's never the case in these things. Like, it's way more complex than that and way more interesting than that. And if you actually try to model what they're actually doing, it's incredibly complex. But this system, I can plug anything into anything else. So it's really confusing. But I can plug anything because I'm using the correct input UGen. So I just use in feedback instead of in, and then they can go in any order. And what that'll do, but it's not quite right because I need to figure out how to do it, because if something is a feedback, I'll have to add a different mixer. Anyway, doesn't matter. But yes, I can do that if I spend a week doing it. And then everything will be fine. Yeah.
Then if you pile up, if you don't have feedback issues, then you don't have latency issues. That
Yeah.
answers the other question.
There's no latency issues due to feedback.
Due
Yeah.
to the fact you have to buffer so much.
Yeah.
And
If it were, it would just
the
be like
latency of you plugging, the UI latency. So we saw you drag and
Uh-huh.
so you cannot in the performance quickly reorder things.
No.
And that's not the plan. It was a design.
I would love to be able to do that. That's actually that's future plan.
Okay.
And it's definitely what he's doing, right? So it's possible. When I get to that point, remind me to talk about it. But it's like I get to the point now where I'm playing and I'm over here. I think I said this the other day. I'm over here and I want this thing, and like this is after many years of playing the instrument where I know I want this thing, and I can't quite get to it as smoothly as I want to. And what would be great is if I could just go whoop, and that's my future Iron Man. What's his name?
Whatever.
Like the movie Iron Man.
I try
And-
to avoid.
Yeah, it's amazing. What? Why would you avoid this? It's so good. It's one of the best movies ever made. And that's not true at all, but it's really good.
Robert Downey Jr.
Robert Downey Jr. Yeah, and he comes up, he goes up, he's like, oh, I want to design this thing, and he's like, choop 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 choop, and he's like, like moving things around the
Oh, yeah, I
screen.
saw that.
That's what I want to do.
Okay.
That's the future, but that's not reality right now. Having the grid is incredibly powerful, right? And that's why we love modular synths, right? That's one of the reasons we love them, because having the grid is incredibly powerful. Like having limitations on what you can do is really good. And then, what's that?
Tell me,
Yeah. So having the grid is incredibly powerful, but what I would need to do is like make some kind of hybrid grid where like there's many grids, and I'll show you the picture of my many grid picture. I have many grids, but I can like I can combine grids. Like, so it's still limited, but not quite. Yeah. Good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So create a home for objects, but it's not just a 5x5 layer in this case. It's actually a 5x5x4 layer. So there's multiple layers of this 5x5 grid going on at one time, and I will show you that really quickly. So the tab feature, man, it's amazing. So I can actually have, and notice like things go away and come back.
Color palette. Just
Color
tell me.
palette, yeah.
Why?
Why pastels?
Yes.
Why random pastels? Because why not?
Good question.
Like, it's just, I mean, it looks terrible already, so let's just make it look worse. I think that's just say like that's not what it's about, you know.
Statement.
It's
It's
a
a statement.
Yeah. So there's basically I can have in one setup I can have, 100 different modules at one time, which that's the like complexity thing going on, right? Like you want to have lots of different things available, but and we'll get to this in a second, but you don't want them all available at one time. So that's the design. Now, another thing I can do, notice the resin draw, which is, I can do this. I never ever, if you saw it, I never look at the screen while I'm playing. That's because this is a horrible interface. And this is a great interface. They did a great job with this. Great interface, horrible interface. Yeah, so see the resin draw, right? And I can say, I want that to be in layer 2. Or layer setup 1, sorry, it's zero-based counting. So if I switch over there now, notice it's still blue, so it says where it's from, and then it's now in setup 1, and I can now why did that other thing stay there? That is a good question. I think that's a bug. Great. It's with the analog synth thing. I know why. Good.
So do the different layers, can they all send output at the same
Major
time?
bug. Say that again.
Can you send sound from the different layers at the same time as well?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, no. So,
So it's almost
but
like program changes or something.
it's program changes. Yeah, exactly. But I can, if something is in this layer and I go to that layer, it's in this layer, right?
And is that the same thing? So if you switch, will the sound be continuous? as you
Yes.
switch?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
So that's how I can.
So you
switch
can have
really.
ways from one to the other through
Exactly.
particular
Lever
sounds.
tail.
And you can switch as it's happening and then go somewhere else.
Exactly. So I use it kind of as do you know what the word modulation means?
I saw that.
Well, right. I think now somebody told me this, and now there's the second talk where I've said this, and I'm like, I don't actually know if that's true. I should look it up. But it's like the etymology is smooth. It means smooth, right? So that's probably not true. But thinking about like a modulation in piano music, right? Like we're playing and we hit a C, and a C is in C major, but a C is also in A flat, and we use that C and we modulate to A flat, and now we're in a different key. Well, we can do the same thing with the software, is that we can be improvising and find the spot that is in both layers, whoop, go to the second layer, and then it's there.
More pragmatic question.
Yeah.
You've got your sexy delays going on,
Mm-hmm.
and you switch to second layer. Will the tail cut or will it continue?
Cuts right off.
Okay. So
Yeah.
big
Crossfade
crossfade
cut.
Well, yeah, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. 1 second, Hans. When I was designing the software, I said this was an aesthetic choice. And if you listen to my acoustic music from that time, it's actually really similar.
Oh, yeah.
Is that I'm dealing with cuts, right? And it's kind of like thinking about like the tape splice as a musical element. Yeah, and I it was a response to seeing so much laptop improvisation that was like, right? And like I love that, and I think I might have said that the other day. I love it. It's like I love drones. I love them, but like I just wanted to do something that wasn't that.
Okay.
And so I made the conscious decision to make things cut. Now I can I can modulate in certain ways, yeah. But I can make smooth transitions, and I've been slowly working those in.
Okay, so if your purple delay now, we're in setup 1, which is share with setup 0. If that's your sexy delay and you switch from 0 to 1, will it clear the buffers or will it?
Oh no, it keeps going.
Okay, good.
It's just one thing. It's not a multiple objects.
Okay, so it's literally just a GUI to a backbone process. Okay.
And so the layers are sort of clearly differentiated, but the grid, does that have some kind of meaning beyond just being 25 spaces?
There is an order of operations.
Okay.
That's all. Is that, that's the top,
Oh, so that happens first.
and that happens last.
Right.
Yeah. And then this is after that. So the mixer is after the grid,
Yep.
and it's after all the grids. And then the mic inputs are before all the grids.
So that means you can only send things forward in the grid.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But hence the feedback question.
Right, and it is possible, and I just need to implement it.
Because
So-
if you talk about modular, when it becomes
Sure.
relevant is when you make the things, you use the quirks of modulation to
Mhm.
feed back into themselves, and then
Mhm.
you get fantastic stuff.
Mhm.
Well, we talked about lesser, we talked about
Mhm.
it's all about feedback.
Yeah.
So next step.
Yeah. I mean, in this situation, like,
But you're the feedback in there.
yeah.
You definitely are.
Yeah, I just need to see what the.
No, but what I mean is that in the system, you react to the system.
Yeah. Which
The
is.
system will react to your touch. So there is a feedback, it's just more abstract.
Yes, sure.
Just a short question for my
Yeah.
understanding is how often do you switch and how fast do you switch between these different sets?
Well, it matters what the musical situation is. So that's the fun thing about it. I can switch as fast as I want. When I was
But
like,
just practical. What happens?
it's just different every time. I've gotten slower, right? So like over time, when
Are
I
we talking
first
seconds or are we talking minutes?
switching, seconds. I mean, it used to be tenths of a second. So it used to be like
From panel to
constant.
panel.
Yeah, just constant panel switching, and so the music was made up of these like really rigid blocks, and that was like a conscious decision of how I wanted to play. But now it's less so, and I've gotten really patient. I think really
A whole
patient.
second.
Yeah, no, a whole like last night we were playing and like there was a lot of fast playing, and that's the other thing is like being able to do both. So there's a lot of fast playing, but then the end of the piece, there's probably like a 7-minute like expansive change, which I would never have done 10 years ago, mostly because I probably couldn't have, like just musically couldn't have. So it's knowing the software enough to be confident in doing that.
And then you stuck to 7 minutes on one panel.
Yeah. So, yeah.
You are calming down.
Yeah. Well, it's also like the thing what we're trying to do now is these like 30, 40-minute pieces. So like that was a 7-minute piece. And actually I probably did, on that one, and that piece that I played, we did, I actually only played in 3 panels. And I played in the first one for like 2.5 minutes, second one for 2.5 minutes, and then the third one for like 30 seconds. Yeah. So that was actually pretty slow. Yes. So yeah. So this idea that modules can be shared between layers is super important, and that sharing allows this idea of modulation. So I said that already. Yes. So this is this is important. So let me switch to here. I'm gonna go actually I'm gonna restart it. So
I like the name you gave it. Very creative.
yeah, it's you know, sometimes I have these moments of creativity, and you gotta embrace those, PA.
Yeah.
You gotta embrace them.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Remember. next time.
So sometimes this freezes on startup, so hopefully this won't be one of those times.
Right next to
So it's not good. So this is the setup, and it's like full shebang. Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna take a second to do this. I should have done this earlier.
Unprotected network.
Yeah,
I'll send you a paper.
good. Alright, yeah. So let's see here. Yeah. So this is like the software, and it's like full. Notice, like, I could never look at the screen here, right? Because there's all this stuff.
Are you sure? Are you sure the screen is at the best resolution for the projector?
It's the projector set the resolution.
Oh, and you
I
can
didn't
change it.
You
I don't
can
know,
change
maybe
it.
you can.
Anyway, just
it's
for
fine.
You know?
Ooh, why does it do that? Somebody can explain that to me. I would love to know. Otherwise, it's
It's
constant.
Apple's police.
Yeah, it's horrible.
Yeah.
Your iPad hasn't been backed up in 400 days. I know. Yeah. So basically, I have all these setups, and it's actually much easier to see on the iPad than it is on the screen of what's actually happening, because let me switch to. Yeah. I'll just show you, like, so this setup, basically I have, the iPad kind of clarifies things for me. Like, I don't look at the screen to know where I am, I don't look at the monitor to know where I am, because it doesn't change, right? But I do look at this to know where I am. So basically I have like a chunk of stuff right here on the top left of the screen, and then I have a chunk of stuff on the top right of the screen. And those two things are two different chunks. So they're actually like different groups of processes. And those different groups of processes are only available like independently. They're not. They can be all available at once, but I can make them independent. Now that I've played it more, it's easier for me to think about all of them at the same time. But when I was learning the instrument, like actually, it was much easier to think. Okay, I'm over here, and then I'm over here. So this is this idea. This is taking advantage of this idea of chunking. And I didn't know this when I was designing it, but I read it later, and it totally struck a chord. I understood. Why the software is designed the way it is. So, is that, you think about, I can't use the example of the social security number in this country. Do you have a social security number?
Yeah, we have something like that, but
What's yours?
I don't know.
What's that?
JT, I don't know. It's got 6 numbers and an A at the end.
And then letters in the beginning.
We just you fill it on a
SG.
form. You never think about it unless you're filling in a form, and then
Uh-huh.
you just open a document where you have it, and then you forget it.
So so you have a social security number. So what's your social security number?
063562233.
Okay, so great. So why do you know that? So it's crazy. So that's a 9-digit number. Like human beings, we are actually incapable of, not incapable, but we're not good at remembering numbers over 7 digits, right? Like once it gets to 7, it's nonsense. That's why your credit card number is 16, because you can't really remember that. There are people that can do it. There are rare people, but this idea of 7, and more 7 more or less. Now the social security number is 9, and yet he can remember it. And mine is 042703665, and I can remember that.
Did you?
What's that?
You just didn't chunk it. I chunked mine into 3,
No,
2, and
right,
4.
and you chunked it into 3, 2, 4. So basically, it's 9 digits, but it's actually 3 digits, 2 digits, 4 digits. And it's easy to remember 3 digits, 2 digits, and 4 digits, but it's not easy to remember 7. So basically, that's why we can remember our social security number. Is because we've chunked it. We've broken it down into like simpler things. We're really good at breaking things down into simpler
It's the
things.
same how Indian music is structured, also in these same kind of chunks,
Yeah.
same lengths.
Yeah, or musical bars. Like we're really like that's how we think about information. And as humans, we're better at thinking about information into small chunks. So the software is actually broken into small chunks where I can only access some things at some time. So if I'm here, let's see here. right? So now I'm in like the chunk where this is available, and if I switch to that, oh, that's weird. Hold on. There we go. Let's use that example. I don't know what that was. Man, you guys really revealing the bugs. So I'm in this chunk, playing the synth, switch to there. Nothing changed on the screen, right? But now I'm in a chunk where that synth is not available because the software, only small things are available at one time. So,
Sorry.
Yep.
What was the GUI feedback you got to know that that process was on and off?
oh, the GUI feedback is on the iPad.
Aha.
So it's
Pass it around, maybe. We promise not to steal it.
yeah. So basically, it's this on the top right. It's like it's 5 years old. So, woo. What did I do? There's that switch.
Okay, good. It's clear. I didn't see what you're doing there. It's just prioritizing.
Sure.
It's like ergonomy. You decide ergonomy of software. There's lots of research doing that. Okay.
Say it again.
Ergonomy of software. Ergonomy, the science.
Ergonomics.
Ergonomics. Is that the
Uh-huh.
word in English?
Yeah.
Of software.
Okay.
A friend of mine, we were talking about that a month ago, like doing a PhD in software ergonomics, where
Yeah.
you have to think of like conflicting interface, trying to gather your attention or take your attention.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to, somebody needs to design prioritization. Imagine like air control, traffic air control.
Oh, yeah, we've got two sides.
I like them playing around with
If
this right now.
you're-
Yes, yeah, I think that goes right along with this. Sorry, I'm just muting it so we don't.
So you're saying,
Yeah. So I think if you think about this chunking, that's exactly what I'm doing, right? So like,
So you've got.
but it's not any chunk, you prioritize your chunk.
yeah, the chunks are thought out. Yeah, it's
So you
not
also
just.
have this thing, is that right, that you've got pages on the left and then something else on the right, so that you can kind of, when you multiply them together, you've got lots of options.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
The page on the two halves of the screen.
The two hubs of the iPad. So you
I don't
select
understand
one
if you
page
don't
and
look
then-
at the screen, don't you lose a lot of CPU to have all that moving GUI stuff that's on the screen?
I don't think so because the especially with SuperCollider. So SuperCollider is not it's not multi-threaded or multi-CPU, but notice that I actually have two of these cubes, right?
Yeah.
Each of the cubes is on its own CPU,
Oh.
and then the GUI runs separately. So it is multi-threaded in a way that like the GUI and the audio are separate, and so then I have two audio servers. So I mean I have if I look here like.
That's when they can talk to each other.
Yeah, I mean, I have. Oh, I don't have the UGen count up there, but there's 12,000 in this one, and there's 13,000 in the other one. So there's 25,000 unit generators running, and then the GUI runs on top of it in a separate CPU.
And that's running,
So,
is that running where like is that running in the general graphic processing for the computer separate from, because like in Macs, for example, like
Yeah.
when you had all that.
It's
all
very
that moving
different to
stuff.
Max because it's a server client model.
Right.
Or SuperCollider.
Yeah.
It's not just a separate thread, it's a different app.
it's a totally different app.
So the
And-
OS will deal with the multiple.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
the thing is in Macs that your low priority thread is also your drawing thread normally, I think.
Yeah.
So there's some limit, whereas I think here, your drawing thread has nothing to do with anything that ever
Yes, it
touches
doesn't have-
audio.
Right.
And nothing to do with anything that ever touches control of any kind. Except from maybe your interactions.
Right.
But generally, they're not that expensive.
Right, they're not as, you know, I was worried about latency. The latency I was worried about was, you know, iPad going over a wireless network to a GUI which controls the synths. But I don't feel it at all, so I don't think it's a
The
problem.
bottleneck is iPad to computer, which
Right.
we measured. We had it's still 100 millisecond tops, which is
Yeah.
you won't notice for
Yeah.
a fader.
I can't imagine it's,
You will notice for drums though.
yeah.
But
Oh, right, yeah. So anyway, so this idea of chunking, I think this is going to want to jump back if you keep switching the screens, but I'm going to, so this kind of illustrates the thing we're talking about, right? So there's like a chunk of stuff that I'm playing with in this layer, right? And inside the layer, there are chunks. So there's a chunk here and another chunk here. Inside the second layer, there's a chunk here and a chunk here. I only can be here. So I can only be playing in this chunk. And then I can only be playing in this chunk, and then I can jump to this one.
And those
Yep.
chunks are independent of the grid again. That's like another concept that you put together.
Yeah.
So from your 25 modules, you put together a set of things, and you say this is a this is a subset, this is a chunk.
Exactly, and the way they're chunked is with a mixer that switches between two mixers. So there's like a left mixer and a right mixer, and I can switch the mixer to only take the inputs here, and then only take the inputs here. It's just going back and forth. Yep.
In terms of the GUI interface for the iPad, did you design that after you kind of built the grid and how you wanted the interactions to be, or did you kind of look at what was naturally useful to lay out and play with, and then assign those values to useful interactions on the
It's
grid?
both
Yeah.
and, yeah. So moving like they've talked to each other back and forth. It's like, oh, this thing I want to do, you know, I try to put them together. Oh, how can I lay that out on a screen that's most effective? I just got a Pro and I haven't been able to set up the software yet because I don't have any time. So it's really sad.
I've been contemplating the Pro.
I know, it's sitting in my office. You want to play with it?
Hey, tell me about that.
Yeah, so so I think that'll open things up. But I've also been working on with that interface for like
I was about
a
to
couple
say,
of years,
that's
so it's like, oh god, now I
my
gotta-
question is I'm gonna wait for you to jump because your sensory motor reflexes, you know, like years of playing with that size.
I don't think it'll be a big problem.
You know, I'll watch you.
Yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I mean, maybe it'll be slower.
I'm looking forward to.
It might be that I want to use that for one thing, and then have the Pro for like this analog stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Or you might be tempted to add the third layer
right?
because you have two on this
Yeah, exactly.
third voice.
Yeah, who knows? And one that could run constantly. Yeah.
Sorry, just another question I had was, in terms of live mixing, so all these
Yeah.
channels that are coming in, how do you handle that in a live sense?
What do you mean?
Do you have any ability to control the mixing environment on the iPad, or is it all
Yeah, so-
hard-coded to be like on-off?
No. There's all kinds of mixers in there.
Right.
So I think like this is something that no one ever talks about in software design. Is that like think about this Mackie mixer, right? 200 pounds, and it's amazing. It's amazing. You can do 5 channels of output. Like they've really thought out like the mute buttons like go to alt 3 4. The aux master can be pre or post fader. If you have a 1202, you can get 6 channels. You can have aux 2 be post fader, but that's a little problem. Because it has to be post fader. If they could just put a pre post fader switch on that, it would make a lot of difference. But like, there's incredible like audio routing capabilities in this thing, and actually that's the biggest thing that we need to think about when we're designing software is like how to route audio efficiently and be able to route things in different ways. So like this is part of what the grids provides, right? It provides this setup where I can easily route 8 channels of audio around, and then I have mixers everywhere where like this mixer, I think that's the one. Yeah. So this mixer right here, 188 mixer, it's right here in the signal chain, is actually incredibly powerful because there's a whole set, and I'll show you this in a second. So, the whole set of stuff that's right here that's actually in all of the layers, and this stuff basically takes all the stuff that's happening up there, and I can grab it and do stuff with it. So yeah.
I just have a question
Yeah.
about. So the setup that you have is in service of something. So you want to move through things quickly,
Yeah.
and you've been describing that really well. Can you tell me just a few of the things you think about aesthetically? Because you do move through things so quickly when you improvise. So I've heard you yesterday and I've heard you before. Can you just tell me about like 2 thoughts or aesthetic concerns that you've had? Like what are you doing when you improvise with someone?
Musically, not technically.
Oh, well,
Or either.
you know, aesthetically, conceptually, like, what are some ideas? Or
Can
what are you
we
thinking
wait
about?
on? Can we wait on that because I
Yeah.
think we'll get and remind me because I'm going to get to something that relates to that
Okay.
in a couple minutes, and then I think it'll make more sense rather than jumping ahead to it. But
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, so this yeah. Remind me, please. So this mixer here I added like a year ago or 2 years ago, because what it does is all this stuff is in all the layers, and I can be interrupting sound here, but I can grab something down here, like I'll do this.
Careful.
Okay, so now I've grabbed that in a buffer, right? And I can,
You say so, but can you verbose it? Because we don't know you got that in the buffer. Can you redo it? We didn't get to the different. Okay, now we get it.
yeah, right? So now it's in a buffer, but if I, well, maybe it's not even that mixer. Which one is it? Oh, it's this one. There it is. Right, so now I can, so what that's allowing me to do is have polyphony, and I can do a smooth crossfade. Right, out of the system. So just thinking about like audio routing as an incredibly powerful tool for expression, because you can say, okay, the audio is going to go this way, and then I'm going to bypass that. I'm going to make the audio go this way. Oh, I'm going to make it go both ways. Just being able to be able to do all those things is hugely expressive.
If I understand you well, that looper is part of the bottom row, which is in all the things.
It's right here, loop machine.
So the loop machine could continue playing, and you would switch to setup 1, setup 2, setup 3.
Right.
And therefore
Yeah.
go to some other places.
Exactly.
Okay, sorry.
Right.
Maybe I'm the only one who didn't.
No, because I hadn't gotten to that.
Okay, good.
So yeah, so exactly. So these 4 things on the bottom are actually in all the layers. So that's another good one to look at. So what did I do? Oh, it's super low. Right. All right. So I'm switching layers, but it's actually. It's actually staying there because it's grabbed.
Did you look at any modular synth designs when you were coming up with this interface? Because this kind of reminds me of the pin controller on the EMS a bit.
I haven't played with that, but yeah. So basically, in 2006, Jeff Snyder and I made an album with the Buchla 100-200, and his research after that led him to this, and my research after that led me to that. And there's no doubt in my mind where that came from, right? Because this is just like the Buchla controllers,
Yes, sure.
right? And then this software is just like or highly influenced by the Buchla. Both of them are highly influenced. So yeah, so it came out of making that album over like a couple months. Okay, so chunking, yeah, and so this idea of what I did in 2015, my big project, took like 2 months. It was all I did for 2 months. Was expanding it to higher dimensionality. So basically, for a couple of years, I only had the 5x5 grid, and then I made the 5x5x4, and now I have multiple copies of the 5x5x4, and I can have as many as I want. It doesn't make sense to have more than 4 because this is a 4-core CPU. So if I were running on a bigger machine, the challenge, oh man, in that is this: centralized OSC, MIDI, and busing services. So thinking about how to centralize like a core set of information so that that information can be it correctly controls a ton of different objects. So actually, let me skip that. I'm going to go to that and talk about it. Yeah. So this is like super boring, but you said this could be technical. So
It can be boring. Yeah.
it could. This is the boring part. Maybe the rest is the boring part. I don't know. So this is what happens if a module, basically, like what I can do. If I show you this in the software, it'll make more sense. What I can do is any of these sliders. See this button right here, AI. Not artificial intelligence, assign instantly. So if I press that button and I move a slider, it will assign it. And that was your idea, which I think I stole from yeah, also stole from Ableton. Just the ability, just like I can press the button, I can move the slider, and now it's in control. Now, that's actually a really challenging design concept because you have this controller that can it's a dumb controller. It's just sending data with an address, basically, right? And then your software needs to take that address and correctly route it so that it's controlling that, or whatever it's controlling. It just needs to correctly do that, which is really challenging. But this is kind of how it works. Is there's a module and there's a bunch of modules in separate servers, right? So there can be like 2 or 4 servers of modules, and so say there's like 300 modules. If on that module I have, even if I just have 3 controllers on each module, right? It's 900 controllers of being able to and the routing capabilities are not finite, right? But they are probably finite by what the computer can do. So what it does is the module says, hey, you press that button, it says, all right, I need a controller, and I want you to give me a controller for a slider. So if I press that, and I want it for a slider, and then I press a button, it's not going to work. Right, so that's actually an important thing to do. So press the button, say I want a controller. You send that information to here. The central control service does number 2, stores the module, actually gets the entire module as an object. So this is a really nice thing about dealing with an object-oriented language like this. You can say you can send the entire module, or it's a pointer to the entire module. Says so that now it knows what the module is, it knows who is requesting the service, and it waits for an incoming control info. The next thing that then I have the lemur and the manta. Now I can have any controller. Any MIDI controller is going to work because MIDI is its own thing. So lemur, manta, and MIDI. But I can also design a class for any controller. So if we wanted to do the push, we could design a class for the push, and it would work in the system. So now I press a button on the lemur, and that sends that information to the central controller. If that was the wrong thing, if I wanted a slider and I press the button, it's like, no, that doesn't work. Sorry. Next thing I do, I move a slider, goes over here. Central control service confirms that the controller is appropriate and adds a function to a dictionary of control functions that basically control the it's a dictionary. It's a multidimensional dictionary. I'll show you a little diagram of it in a second. So adds the function. So that's like moving a slider. The function is I'm going to move the slider and change some information. So it puts that into here. So basically, this thing knows every piece of every module. It has access to every module's functions, and it can spit out it can make them do the thing that they're supposed to do when the slider on the lemur moves. 5 controller information is sent to CSS. So now it's assigned. It should work. So then we move that slider. It sends the information here. This thing receives the controller information, and it's parsed and disseminated correctly to the correct module. Boom, the module is controlled by the.
If it's kind of shared by, if that controller is global controller,
No share.
Does it remove it from that, or does it not allow it?
It just overwrites it. Yeah, it's so it doesn't allow it because of the way it's saved. So basically, like, do you guys know what a dictionary is? So a dictionary is a data structure that is really useful. So it's basically an array that is stored it's accessed by pointers, by strings. So like I can have 5 things in the array, but like they're labeled by strings, like Alex, PA, Sam, and then so I say like, oh, give me the thing at Alex, and it looks at the thing at Alex and gives it to me. Right. So basically, I use this multi-dimensional array to deal with that. So basically, a multi-dimensional dictionary. So first, it looks like when it gets the slider in, it's like looks what server is open, what servers are open. So if any of these servers are open, which they do have like names, then it says, okay, is that controller address in the dictionary? And if it is, it says, is that controller, which setup is that controller in? And if it's in setup 0 and setup 1, then it'll send that, it'll execute the function in each of the setups that it's in. So you can imagine that this is not a data structure you want to look at on a page, because there's like, think about 900 different controllers being controlled by this data structure, which could have, if there's 900 controllers and all of them are in all the setups, then there are, whatever, what's 900 times 4? Yeah, so there's that many objects in this like hairy data structure. But I think I'm showing this to say like this is like the thing we're talking about. I talked about at the beginning about form. Like this is form, right? And the form here actually allows for the music to make sense. Like if it weren't in a good form, I think that's a good aesthetic answer maybe. But the form allows things to make sense, just like the form of the violin, the shape of the violin allows it to do what it does. Yeah.
Mapping of value, you send normalized value.
These are all 0 to 1.
Okay.
SuperCollider guys.
Yeah.
I was guessing that bit. The second bit is when you have exponential, like if you control pitch.
Yeah.
Presume you put it on the log scale.
Yeah, so each of the controllers, each of the controllers knows, it gets a value and it maps it.
Okay, so the controllers are meant to receive 0 to 1 and
Yeah.
they deal with it.
And they deal with
And
it.
that's part of your aesthetical bias.
That is actually James McCartney's aesthetical bias, because that's how control spec works. It's SuperCollider.
But you could rescale things.
I was about to say, I use SuperCollider with other values, you know?
Sure.
So I never thought it was limited.
But
to
the
0 to 1.
control spec specifically, just I think it only takes. Yeah, it only takes. Yeah, you give it what you want out of it, but it only takes 0 to 1. So if you want to go from another value to 0, that's actually a really hard thing to do in SuperCollider, is to scale values.
So what, for those of us who don't know what control spec is?
That is the thing. That is the thing that scales values.
That's your scale.
It's a
like your
scale. It's a scale. Yeah, exactly. I don't know why there isn't one that does from this to this to this to this. That would be very
Because all
nice.
of the built-in things like mouse, X, everything comes out 0 to 1.
Yeah, but it would be nice, you know.
Yeah,
It's
but
like-
I mean, I think you're right. It's James's way of thinking
Yeah.
was you deal with control 0 to 1 and then you scale them at the end.
Yeah, and I think that also, yeah, it comes down. That's probably. No, there's probably lots of reasons for that. You know, a oscillator is basically doing 1 to negative 1 to 1, right? And then that's
Yeah, but
the
if
control
you-
structure.
In C sound, we were using the integer value. I remember cracking my brains learning the exponents of 2 to remember what 16. You know,
Yeah, well, 0 to 1 is so much easier.
yeah, I know. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, no,
Um,
it's just I never made the link.
Yeah. So, okay. So that's a little aside on, like, thinking about that kind of stuff. Thinking about this structure and then thinking about that, like a centralized service that does that, is actually really important when you're designing a big piece of software. You really, but it's not like I had that right away. And in fact, I've redesigned that central service 3 times. Like I had the original one, and then when I went to the cube, I was like, oh shit, that's not going to work. And then when I went to the 4 cubes, it was like I had to rearrange I reused the nested dictionary, but I had to rearrange the order that it looks at information in the dictionary, and that took some time to like redo all the code to do that. Psychological results of this kind of setup. One is a flow state. So if you've read, does anyone who knows the name of the Czech? Yeah, that's right. This is this Czech researcher who talks about this idea of flow state, and it's this idea that like when we're doing something that we're like really good at, and we don't have to think about it, we can be highly expressive. So if we can access our non-conscious brain, like our conscious brain is cool. Like I like being conscious, but like actually it's not that powerful, and our non-conscious brain is actually way more powerful. And this there's a couple things. I got to get the number correctly for how many bits of information our body can take in at one time, but it's like 18 million, right? And our non-conscious brain can deal with that information. In fact, it's constantly dealing with that information. Our conscious brain, how many bits? Who's got it?
Sorry?
How many bits can our conscious brain deal with? So we take in 18 million bits.
It's like 7 plus or minus 2.
That's the other thing I was talking about. It's 16.
16.
16 bits. So that's a very small number. So like, you know, when you start like thinking about like, oh, my toe hurts, you're taking up like 2 bits of information, you know, you're like consciously taking up 2 of the 16 bits in your brain.
What time scale are we talking?
Yeah, there's when
I think it's a second.
it's very
Yeah.
short.
Yeah. So yeah, it's really bad. Yeah, this chunking thing actually helps us. The chunking thing helps us enter the flow state. So like the smaller the pieces of information that I'm dealing with, the more focused on it I can be, and then I can expand out to think about moving around these pieces of information. Yeah, so if we don't want to consciously think, that's probably a good thing, because our conscious brain is actually 0.25 to 0.5 seconds behind the subconscious brain. This is crazy. So they did this study of people, so they sit at a chair and they have a button on their left hand and their right hand. And they're supposed to like not think about it, not think about it, not think about it, and then hit one of the buttons. And looking at brain waves, they realized that the brain waves tell you which button you're gonna hit a half second before you hit the button. A half second. So you've made that decision non-consciously. You thought you consciously made the decision, but you didn't. You non-consciously made it a half second before you made it. And in fact, they can predict with a reasonable amount of accuracy 7 seconds ahead
Which one you take?
which one you're gonna pick. So, you know, that kind
And
of,
so more depressing one, 2.5 strings. That's what the brain can cope with.
yeah.
So you can think of 2.5 things at the same time, and then you start switching. Thinking fast and slow. You read that book?
I haven't read Thinking Fast and Slow. I've
That's
read.
the one you read.
I need to read that. Yeah. The other one is the user illusion, which is fantastic. Yeah, I got to go back to Thinking Fast and Slow. They're similar pop science books on consciousness. And the user illusion one is talking about, we basically have this. It's not really this. It's basically like you have all this information coming into your non-conscious brain, and then you have this like kind of like studio that's like, okay, what does he need to know? We're gonna like give him this information and that information. See if did that work? You know, it's like it's not giving you all the information, it's actually choosing the information to give you. So you don't want to think like that when you're improvising. You want to think with your non-conscious brain, and the speed of the software helps me do that, and the chunk and the smallness of actual chunks. The chunking also has a second result, which is that it can result in formalized structures that where if I'm improvising in a place like this thing, so I'm improvising here, I'm going A, B, and then D, and then F, and then I jump over here and I'm like I, B, J, K, L, I, B, and then I jump back over here, A, B. Like I've kind of made a structure there where I'm referencing something in the past, and I'm creating phrasing that has like large structural reference. Now, is that actually happening? Maybe not totally, but I think there are sonic things that come back over time that hopefully the listener is hearing, and even though they're probably not conscious of hearing that, and the formal structure of the software allows those kinds of structures to be heard. So that's the other form aspect.
And you want that to happen?
I do, yeah. I don't want it to be like a sonata form.
No. Because you introduced the talk about it wanting to be fragile and,
Mhm.
and unexpected.
Yeah.
And yet here we are talking about.
Well, it's somewhere between unexpected and expected, right? So it's actually like you have to have some kind of reference,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, or at least make it possible. But if it's not possible, then I don't know.
Would you prefer it to be not possible?
No, I'd prefer
You
to
could
be able.
build random into it, couldn't you? So that,
But random is really already there.
But if
It's
you went
much
to be-
easier. It's much harder to build the structure into it.
sure, if you went to B and it went to Z, then
Oh, it's fine.
you'd be fucked.
Well, you're not gonna. I mean, it's fine to not reference, but
Yeah.
you should be able to do that too. So it's fine to be able to play fast, but you should also be able to play slow.
Yeah.
And you should be able to make different, any multitude of gestural phrases, so that if you need to, so this is, I'll see this happen. One thing is that I'm not going to be, I'm a little cocky about one thing, is that I feel like I can sit down with anyone and play music, right? And because I am very versatile, so if this person wants to play like super slow and like wants it to be really harmonic, like cool, I can do that. If they want to play super fast and they want it to be all noisy, I can do that. And I'll see sometimes people who don't have the versatility, who can do one thing really, really well, and then they can't go to this other thing. And you can see why the music doesn't work, because then you can't move to this new space. Now there's often spaces that you go to that you can't move to, and then you try to learn that. But being able to do all the stuff, like being able to do all the stuff is virtuosity. Being able to do the right thing is musicality. So that's the way to put it. Did you have a question, Hans?
No, more like to add to that, like for me it's like the large formal structure is also where you end up from being spontaneous.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still you are spontaneous, but it's something that you stick to when you are improvising. At least a lot of improvisers do, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. In the end, we all have our limitations. Yeah.
I'm interested to know how do you think about pulse or these pulsating iterations in music in relation to kind of more free, free form?
What do you mean by pulse?
I mean, is it kind of pulsating? Is it some kind of a contrast to the kind of more free form?
Oh,
rhythm?
the sound that I make?
Yeah.
I don't think of it that way. I think of that sound. I think the sound you're referencing. I'm not really sure, maybe, but
basically pulsating iterations
Uh-huh.
of different kind of speeds.
Are you referencing something I did, or are you?
I mean, I've noticed this in this performance.
Uh-huh.
Kind of,
Do you mean the kind of regular periodicity of some of the sounds?
yeah, just
Oh. Yeah, I mean, I think that.
But he does a lot of low speed amplitude modulation on stuttering sound from the trumpet, which will sound exactly what you sing. But it's not just him, it's also the other source.
Yeah, but I think it's also. I do like rhythm, so being able to make some rhythms is important. And I think if we want to be between predictable and unpredictable, well, you can have unpredictable sounds happening behind a rhythm, and the rhythm is predictable, but the sounds are not. So I think having some. I'm also a fan of really dumb logic, like just on-off things. So like it's just going deech, 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 right? Turning on and off. And I think that that's I love this one. Oh, that's the old thing. Right, it's a straight rhythm, but the noise behind it is changing, and I can interrupt it. So then I can interrupt there's a predictability, and then you can interrupt the predictability. If you never have the predictability there, then it's hard to interrupt that. I think, does that answer the question?
yeah. I mean, the thing is, I was just like playing today with overlaying some kind of regular pulse material over some very kind of broken, temporally distorted
Yeah.
stuff. This made a lot more tension, and also the brokenness just became much more broken as.
Yeah.
So I was thinking if these are some considerations.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, with that kind of stuff, I think, in this, thinking like Parmigiani, totally pro at having two layers of one thing that's slow, and then this other layer that's all these like fast rhythms, and like because of that, not only does the music have multiple layers, that's like how electronic music has multiple layers, but yeah, then you're perceiving these different layers because of the different rhythmic structures.
It's just, it helps to segregate the streams.
Yeah.
If one is super regular and it will be lower in pitch,
Mhm.
and the other one, as you say, Parmigiani is good at segregating very
Yeah.
clearly.
Yeah.
And that makes it very readable, yet very complex.
Right.
And therefore the complexity is simpler in appearance, i.e. you can communicate the complexity more simply.
Well, you can allow for the
You know, and like, I imagine like, without naming any music, 17 people playing like at the
Right.
same time for 10 minutes.
Right.
The brain just like fusion.
Right, it becomes one thing. Yeah. Yeah.
And then when you have Parmigiani or something, often you play very clear
Yeah.
counter gesture, which is segregated in many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think of if anyone's like writes the notes on the page composer, there's the classic new music donkey sound, which is that says like bing brr, bing brr, bing brr, bing brr. I use that all the time, and I use it because it's so dumb and simple, but you can do all these things with it, and then you can have all these other layers to it. But like providing the listener with something that's like really clear to counter everything else, I think is really. Also, there's a lot of my pieces, and there's another way I'll do this, which is like in formal structures dealing with like drastic change and then a drone. And the reason why is that essentially, if drastic change is all these like tape slices, and then there's a cut, and then there's a drone, well, that's just another tape slice. So then you hear a large tape slice as the form of the piece, and then you realize, oh, the other half of the piece is just tape slices. But I think if it was just tape slices the whole time, then it would get really boring, and you wouldn't have it like a majorly clear, dumb thing to grasp onto to go back and listen again and see what you missed. So I think the answer is I like dumb things because they make the non-dumb things more approachable. Yeah.
Kind of a two-headed question. One is you kind of set up a very multi-dimensional, multi-process thing,
Mhm.
instrument kind of thing. But mapping-wise, it's very one-to-one
Yes.
in full range and in terms of single one-to-one mapping physically.
Yeah.
With that then being manifest in 3 types of interface, so like completely virtual, sort of semi-analog kind of touch-based, and then physical hardware knob. And how do those things inform each other? How do you feel about that? And like what is, there's a question in there.
Yeah. No.
So that was Jake's, Rodrigo. You have to,
Yeah.
you have to finish it in your
You put
head.
the pieces, you know?
Yeah, no, I think I understand maybe a question, which is, I think the reason why things are one-to-one is because the complexity doesn't come out of each, like, the modules are complex, actually, but the control of the modules is simple, and it's really direct, and it's like a slider controls a slider. And the reason why is, like, I don't want to be controlling an algorithm that changes over time. I think it's too slow. I mean, it's possible, but it's a very slow way to work. It's a good way to work if you're composing something and you want, yeah, you want the thing to go in a direction over time. But like if I'm playing with somebody like Peter, like he's changing all the time. So if I do that and I set this algorithm in motion, then I have to like let it go.
Or for example, having like one parameter that controls like this one module has one, like an X and a Y
Oh.
parameter that is multidimensional.
Oh yeah, no, I have that.
All
So
right,
yeah,
okay.
actually like the synth I was playing earlier, this one.
All right, okay.
I like.
So that's outside of the instant mapping, the assign instantly thing.
It's that the XY is mapped to it doesn't map to multiple controls. It's up there in the top left,
Yeah.
right? It's just controlling that, but that controller can control multiple parameters.
Right.
So it does it inside the.
Yeah. Okay,
And so that's
okay.
predefined.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I also think that like the complexity comes out of lots of simple things tied together rather than something being complex. And that's just that's just coming from the analog synth thing.
Yeah, it's like multi cables.
Yeah, exactly. I think that answers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing, like how do you, because I guess the the Manta is very different from the iPad, which
Yeah.
is very different from your
When I
volume control.
when I first started playing, the iPad was most stuff was on the Manta, right? And then I said this the other day. I think that I had a BCF 2000. Maybe I didn't.
You did.
I did. Yeah, and then I went on my first European tour, and I was like, this thing needs to get out of my backpack. You know, like it's just gigantic. Like it was awesome. It had like faders. You switch pages, and faders are flying all over the place. They make just as much noise as you. Super cool. But I moved to the iPad because it's super small and it fits in the bag. So that's why I'm using it. It's also like it's amazing, multi-touch. Like what else? You know, it's amazing how you can be expressive with that. And the screens change. Oh, it's amazing. But there's certain things that the Manta can do, like this, which. So it's thinking like, even though this is essentially, the thing I'm playing actually has, if I were to think about it like the iPad, it would be 36 sliders, right, that I can move up and down, which could be expressive, but it's actually so much more expressive on this. It actually fits this instrument like really much better. So I think it's thinking about the instrument in the way, these interfaces in the way that, I don't know, John Cage thinks about the violin, right? He doesn't think about it as like, oh, I'm gonna write a melody and put it on the violin. He thinks about it like, oh, what is a violin, right? So I think that's like thinking, oh, what is this thing and what fits well on here? And then what is this thing and what fits well on here? And honestly, like buttons and sliders, perfect. Anything that works with a button and slider goes on here. Anything that's like needs like lots of continuous control or works well with this kind of gesture, like really like that's not going to work over here. So it's just like how the hands work. Whereas like, you know, like 2XYs can be really expressive in a different way. So thinking about like, and in the end, like that's all it is. It's buttons and sliders. So.
And that's what Wenderly says, you know, mapping is everything.
Mapping is everything, yeah. So I think that's, yeah. Oh yeah, go
So I
ahead.
just have one technical question. And so does the Manta
Yeah.
control also SuperCollider?
Yeah, it's
or
just-
is it an independent instrument?
No, it just controls SuperCollider.
Okay, but we don't see it here.
Well,
You don't
yeah,
see
so
it.
like the thing I'm controlling here is this. Whoa. Never knew you could do that. I'm learning so many things. Look at that. Oh, why? That's so weird.
No, it's-
That doesn't even make sense.
Now it's 10.
Yeah. So it's controlling this, but you don't see it move the sliders because it doesn't make sense. And like another thing it's controlling is this. There's no sliders to move, but it's yeah. I can make it control sliders.
That's a good example for mapping as designed, this one.
So
The
it-
sine wave that you show, because the three buttons are not doing the same thing beside
Right.
each other on the Manta.
Right.
So maybe if you showed, for those who were not.
Oh yeah. So basically, like I have a frequency modulation tree. So there's my oscillator, and then I can control the frequency of the oscillator. Now this already is like, if I just do that, it's pretty dumb sounding. I like it though, but then it's like, so this can only give me a value of 0 to 200, right? As with a touch. So it's like, well, I need more range than that. I can't have a 0 to 200 range. So I have 3 0 to 200 ranges. Now that also has the volume of the modulator, index of the modulator, and then the frequency of the modulator. And that's actually, I like that sound. And I can add some noise. I can filter it. So here's the Buchla thing I was talking about, the spectral gate. Right? It's totally the end.
Do you ever play with other musicians with just that?
No, not anymore. I
Because
used to.
it seems like that. I mean, I like that, and if I mean,
That sound?
well, I like the whole setup that you've got. But it's interesting because it really seems to me like with the processing approach, it's like this sort of, it's kind of like I think maybe what Angie was asking about, but maybe not.
Yeah.
It seems like you're taking this whole position where you're in response for the most part.
Let me get to that.
Because it also even visually comes across a bit like especially in the video with Peter, where he's like Dizzy Gillespie and sweating, and you look like basically like you're an accountant processing.
Oh man, come on!
It's great, though. It's great. I mean, I think it comes across really well in that way. But it's just
I've never
that,
seen an accountant
the power
make
that.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like you have. In a way, a lot more control over what you seem like what we're hearing in the final result, but you then also seem really dependent on.
Absolutely.
On this incoming
So
information.
there's a couple reasons for that. So first of all, there is a track, the Peter Evans Quintet on Destination Void for Gary Rydstrom and Ben Bird, which is me. I'm only playing this instrument. That's all I do the whole time. And it's like 15 minutes long. So if you want to hear 15 minutes of that, check it out. And it's actually, that track is crazy. It's the band's part's notated, and I'm just improvising on top of the band. And actually, it's this thing where they're doing these hits, and Peter's playing just a high.
Can you just play 2 seconds?
Yeah.
Please?
Oh, I will.
It's a bit abstract.
It is a bit abstract.
Sorry to be
Where did the
so-
iTunes go?
7 seconds.
You trashed it because we were asking for shit.
Right.
Yeah.
Where is it? No, Destination Void. There it is. So, yeah, for Gary Rydstrom. So, towards the middle of the piece, they're like triggering me on. Yeah, so then they'll trigger it and I'll go off. And then we'll trigger and we'll go on. And the trigger and go off. Is anyone Austrian? Okay. So we played this piece in Graz in Austria, and it just like we're triggering me on and off, and like then he triggers me off, and we literally waited for 2 minutes and didn't make any sound, and it's dead silent, and like 400 people just sitting there, and that's all people could talk about after the show. They were just like so thrilled by this 2 minutes of silence. They just thought it was great. It's like torture. It's just absolutely torturous. 2 minutes. They loved
What was
it.
the real time of that length? 45 seconds?
No, it was 2 minutes.
A real 120
It was
seconds.
insane. It felt insane.
Yeah, but
just like we're all just sitting there like, when's, because Peter's giving the cues and he just like waited. I think he just knew his audience. He knew that the Graz audience, that's what it was. Yeah. So, oh yeah, almost out of time, huh? Good. Let me just finish this up and yeah, see you later. And so, a couple things. One is this idea of sound module vectors. So if we make all these modules and they're actually distinct, sonically distinct, and how can we think about them as sonically distinct? Well, we can think about, this is like 8 bad descriptors, like delay, how much delay is added to the sound, how much space change, how much instrumental interaction is there between the instrument and the sound, how much lap-up interaction is there, how much timbral distortion do we have, how much envelope distortion do we have, and how much, is there a high synthesis value or is it a low synthesis value?
Hey, man, you say it's dumb, but it's far from dumb, these descriptors.
Yeah, I
they're
think
they're quite exciting.
Yeah, I like them.
But why did you say they're dumb?
Well, meaning that there could be other ones. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not pretending that this is.
The whole taxonomy of.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just giving 8 of them. So basically, if all of our modules have a unique descriptor to describe them, and they each do a different thing with the sound, then traversing that vector space results in information rich live performance. So like I'm over here and I go over here and then it's in a different space. I mean, you think about like good electronic music, it's about like spatial depth like this, but I'm talking about spatial and timbral depth in multiple dimensions and being able to move around them. So this is what you were asking about. So the issue with the laptop, if you're doing live processing, is that you're always processing, right? And the player, Peter, played something and I did something to it. Now, Dennis Smalley has this idea of source bonding. So he says, like, if there's a trombone on the stage, and I think he actually uses trombone as the example. So a trombone on the stage and there's electronics, the audience is just going to automatically think all the electronics are like trombone-y sounds. They're just going to like relate them to the trombone. So they're going to have source bonding between the trombone and the electronics. And they're going to think of the trombone as the source. Now, I think this might be generational, and I think that when I've said this to people in their 20s, they're like, no, it's not like that anymore. And so because electronics are even more prevalent in their lives than in mine. But the way to get around that, and there's two ways to get around it. One is distortion, and one is delay. And so if I delay a sound long enough, then it's not Peter's sound anymore. And if I distort it long, you're actually the person that asked this the other day, right? So I distort it long enough, not long enough, I distort it enough, then it's far away from the trumpet. But if I do both, if I distort it and delay it, and I'm pitch shifting it and doing all this crazy stuff with it, at some point it's just not the trumpet anymore. And then I can even take a lead, I can play a solo with trumpet sounds that I recorded by the trumpet player, and then they start reacting to me, right? So you can take the lead, and the weird thing is, the paradox is that you're taking the lead by delaying the sound.